see this, you probably can't even fucking see this. Can't even make that out at all. Alright, well, anyway. We're live from the from Strawberry Fields in Central Park. And I just thought I've only got about 40% battery, so I'm just gonna do about an hour, everybody. Just give you guys a break. Although it's weirdly, I feel like it's the longer videos that actually do better. You know, it's when I stream for like 5 hours, because YouTube, for whatever reason, doesn't feed people in until 2 hours in. But probably not gonna walk through the park just because there have been people getting robbed and shit. I'm going to talk about wall ball. And I'm going to talk about beat literature and what it means to me. I read this amazing piece by Yuko Otomo about Ted Jones, which was published in 2015. It really should be like printed somewhere. It's online. It's some like Italian fucking, but it's really an amazing piece. It's very, very well written. And I mean, it's really brilliant. It's a brilliant fucking piece. It's sort of a reminiscence. This poet Ted Jones, who was a beatnik type guy. I guess her and Stephen Dalachinsky, the much missed kind of jazz poet, were friends with Ted Jones. So it's kind of, a Lives of the Poets kind of reminiscence of there's a fucking gate right there. Jesus Christ. That's where John Lennon, you can feel it every time you walk by. You just feel that moment. I don't know. It's so strange. Not that it was unusual for people to get shot in New York, at that time, but just another typical New York death. I guess the last song John Lennon heard as he was dying, he heard All My Loving by, song written by Paul. That's kind of crazy. How do you become a world magician? I don't know. It's not easy. I guess we've just got to get in touch with the magic of our own lives, however we can. And, publicity, luck, we can't, okay, so I was reading, I got this book, I think it's called Beat Down to Your Soul. It's really an excellent collection of kind of like, nonfiction pieces, prose, that are sort of like, not like ephemera, but articles about the beats, things, Joyce Johnson, Eileen Kaufman, it's got a lot of it's almost like a mosaic of that era, kind of historically. There's a lot of voices, and it's just a really good kind of, the thing about beat literature is it doesn't really get respect academically, or do people even read it anymore? It's still published, it's still kind of known and shit. But part of what I want to talk about is the difference between the Apollonian and the Dionysian. This is kind of a classic dichotomy. I don't know, maybe this is just an academic thing or a philosophical thing. But, the beat kind of represents the Dionysian in literature, which, the Apollonian, I was just reading this really fascinating piece by William Everson, Brother Antinonius, or whatever his name is, about this. And so I guess the Apollonian is like rational, orderly, kind of an ego, kind of trying to control things. Most poetry, I would say, most academic, we live, his point was the 20th century was this very Apollonian century, where it was like people were trying to control society and make it very rational and make it. But the thing is, the Dionysian is more like this kind of wine god, unconscious, a little bit more of like a primal force, maybe a darkness or like a party, wild. Whitman's Wild Children, right? And it makes sense that sort of official culture, official verse culture would want to deny that stuff and repress that stuff. And I think even this moment, we're still in this moment, right? Where it's just like, people kind of trying to control the narrative, do the right thing, not be wild, not be kind of prone to their fancies or their kind of emotions or their and so sort of as I'm reading, I haven't really looked that much at beat stuff in a couple years. This is something I was sort of talking about in my last piece was, I just don't really, I feel so kind of rejected or whatever by literary world that it's like I don't really read that much anymore. I've been kind of trying to get inspiration and ideas from real life, from other things than books. It's this Apollonian kind of academic thing, I think that's off-putting to me. This kind of prim, proper, and you see this today, it's like that Truman Capote thing about, that's not writing, that's typing. I think people still don't really appreciate or even understand the achievement or the technique or the of the beat thing, like I was reading this piece by Joyce Carol Oates that's in the book, and she's talking about how Jack Kerouac never developed as a writer. When On the Road came out, it got this unbelievable review in the New York Times that was basically just like a fluke. The guy who was supposed to review it was like kind of conservative and just kind of an old, milquetoast guy. There was somebody that filled in for him and wrote this review that was just like, it changed Jack Kerouac's life, right? Like overnight. It said the book was like a historical event and shit, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I mean, it's, not that the reviewer was wrong. The reviewer was right. But I think with Jack Kerouac, it's like, it's if you're saying that his writing didn't develop, you're not really like looking at what he's doing. I mean, every book is its own kind of work. It's almost like its own genre. Like if you look at something like Big Sur, it is different than Dharma Bums. It is different than On Road. It is different than Old Angel Midnight. It is different than Visions of Cody. Maybe it didn't develop in this kind of mature, academic way like Joyce Carol Oates. She publishes like 2 fucking novels a year or something. She's so prolific, it's crazy. She teaches at Princeton and shit. Good for Joyce Carol Oates, but it's just easy to shit all over beat literature. I also think it's like a class thing, big time. Beat literature was a working class way of sort of smuggling, and I think this Dionysian impulse in general is sort of like coming from poverty or coming from like human beings that are maybe not acknowledged, that are not respected, that kind of break out in this wild energy as a way of being alive, really, and the work is full of passion, it's full of emotion, it's full of, maybe to the detriment of, the setting up the style and making it super fucking readable when you're sober or something. Drugs are a part of it, I would say. The party, the bacchanal of drinking wine, at the Six Gallery reading, right? Kerouac is walking around with a jug of wine for everyone. And he's this sort of Puck or something. That's sort of what like Midsummer Night's Dream is, right? They're from this like royal court. It's these fucking, like princes and whatever the fuck. And then they go into the dark forest, which is sort of like the unconscious, which is sort of like, this, they meet this fucking, they hallucinate this guy with a donkey head. They take these fucking potions and shit. Part of what Brother Antinonius says is that repressing the Dionysian, or not acknowledging it, trying to be too Apollonian, trying to be too classical and kind of controlled and blah, 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 can result in, he said, the Nazis were like the ultimate example of like the Dionysian in the 20th century, right? It was just this all hell breaking loose of emotion and frustration and I don't know, I guess kind of a decadence or something maybe. And so, I mean, that's what happens, right? I mean, that's the point of what he's saying. If you try to be too Apollonian, if you try to repress things too much, if you try to be too controlled, if you deny your human nature, I mean, we are animals, right? That's kind of part of the point, is the Dionysian kind of is the animal part of us. That is part of us, right? Even though we want to move past it, or we don't understand it, or we want to deny it, it is who we are. We are animals, We're this kind of evolutionary buildup, but there's, millions of species that are kind of the building blocks of what we are now. And, I think with literature now, with the way it's sort of controlled by identity politics and sort of negotiate, that's how everything is decided now. I remember when I first got to Poetry Project, I heard somebody say something about how it used to be more of a party than it is now. I first got to Poetry Project like 2016, 2017, yeah. And as they said, it was more of a party than it is now. And I think this Trump thing is this big acting out of kind of, the slob, the American, the slob, the petty, the indulgent, the animal, the reptile brain of this country, of this society. And we're, they're trying, it makes sense, but that emerged. Why did that emerge? Why did that come out? The Obama thing was maybe too poised for people. And obviously, the race thing is a big part of it. White people want to repress that that side of things, that culture. They're confused, they're angry. So what do? There's this kind of bad indulgence with but it's funny how it would break out in that way, in a way that I don't totally understand, but with my own work, I remember having a conversation with the director of the Poetry Project. They were talking about, we know this poet, I studied with this poet in college, who has this thing, oh, there's a strand up here. I didn't know that. Maybe I should go in for a minute, I think it's closed. And the poet had this thing about Apollonian versus Dionysian. If you read his Paris Review interview, Henri Cole. He talks about Apollonian versus Dionysian in his own work. And I would say, for the most part, Henri Cole's work is very Apollonian. He writes these sonnets. They're not super formal, but they are sonnets. And he's always been within academia. He's very successful at that. And part of the point that Henri Cole was making with the director of the Poetry Project was they were more Apollonian. That's like it's like the difference between 92nd Street Y and it's uptown and downtown, right? Columbia, 92nd Street Y, like that's all Apollonian. These colleges, the downtown thing, the beat thing, jazz, free jazz, drugs, wild parties, rent parties, Ted Jones, no bread, no Ted. That's Dionysian. That's this kind of revelry. It's this kind of party. And I don't know where you find that now. I suppose it's happening. It seems like the way that people even party is like super controlled and responsible. Like I don't know where the recklessness is. I don't know where the danger is really in our society anymore, to be honest. I don't know where the fun is. It seems like people are very self-managing and afraid of each other and I don't know, too responsible or something. I don't know. There's a lot of things. I think, maybe the powers that be, they want that kind of social control. They don't want this. I mean, I guess that's the point, right? That's the point. And so with the beat, with the literature, with the way that they were writing, embracing this kind of wino, hobo, messy, kind of defiantly. My understanding of it is Kerouac, he went to Columbia, he spent time in the city, sending his novels to fucking publishers and shit, and he just got rejected so much. Oh, that's right, there's supposed to be a fucking open mic up here somewhere. Peter Glissman was telling me there's some open mic at a church on Fridays up here. Fuck, I should have figured that out. I should be doing that right now instead of this. No, I mean, I'm trying to get on, I don't know. Early this morning when I was like awake, my sleep schedule is all fucked up, so it's like I lie in bed till like 3 o'clock, but I'm like awake, but I'm like trying to sleep. So I got all these thoughts racing through my head. I'm like, oh, I need to get on, I need to talk about this, I need to talk about that. Now it's like late. But I feel, I don't know, I feel obligated. I want to get on and, make content for people and put in some time. And so anyway, but I've also been sober for like the last 2 days because I don't have any weed, because the only place to fucking buy weed in New York is like this fucking van over by Ashley's house, because they busted all the weed stores. So I'm experimenting with sobriety, trying to see what kind of effect that has on the work. So, when I'm high, I can't read like really at all. I feel like reading is, when you're not high, it's like you have to self-motivate. Like when you're high, it's just like, it's kind of cheating, because it's just like everything feels good. Everything's interesting. And like you got this energy and you got this kind of, just kind of base level of feeling goodness that's kind of unearned. Whereas like when you're sober, it's just like, oh my God. It's like the wind has gone out of the sails and the sea is dead calm, and it's like you gotta make your own everything. You gotta make your own emotion. You gotta make your own. And so, but at the same time, the last couple of days, I've just been sitting around, kind of bored and sad, not really doing much, because it's just like I'm not stimulated. I'm not, I don't have any chemicals that this country runs on: coffee, caffeine, beer, THC, whatever it is, gummies. I went to the How I Met Your Mother bar. There's this bar. Ooh, this is a nice table. There's this bar. I think it's on 55th Street, McGee's. Those guys who wrote How I Met Your Mother, I guess, they were writers on Letterman in the 90s. And so McGee's is right around the corner from Letterman. It's on 55th, right off Broadway. And so I guess they used to go there, when they were done with their day at the Late Show or whatever. So I went to this McGee's bar, and it's just like there's fucking pictures of How I Met Your Mother everywhere. It's just like there's a rug right when you walk in. It's like McGee's Pub, home of How I Met Your Mother. It's like, Jesus Christ, they are really milking the shit out of that. And why not? I mean, it's an amazing cultural achievement. I thought it was hilarious and kind of charming, actually, the way that they were so proud and trying to exploit their How I Met Your Mother connection. Yes, the Upper West Side, everybody. Yeah, so I recommend everybody read this fucking Ted Jones piece. It's really amazing. I mean, so getting back in touch with this beat literature, I don't know, it's kind of like reconnecting with something I think that was like kind of important or helpful for me, where it's like, Ted Jones, he lived in New York for a time. He was roommates with Charlie Parker. He was like one of the original Village kind of coffee house entertainers, really. He liked oral poetry. He'd do jazz poetry readings, right? And, he'd do it in the coffee houses. But he was also like a big-time world traveler. He lived in Paris for a long time. He lived in Africa. He lived in Timbuktu, in Mali, I think. And, he just traveled around like a bird. One of the things Yuko Tomo says in the piece is he didn't really have he had apartments and shit, but she says that his apartment was like a nest, like a bird. It's like he would sleep there, but then he was out in the world. He was out in the world with people, doing readings, traveling. Then he'd kind of fly back to his apartment. And I don't know. I've gotten so caught up in trying to climb the New York mountain, and I'm just not any good at it, really. This is what I do, basically. I walk around the streets. I meet people at open mics. I've tried to sort of insert myself into the skin of literary world or whatever, but I don't know. It's not easy to crack that highfalutin world, and especially not when you're a drug addict like me. And not that I want to do like some kind of rehash Beat Generation cliche or something, but I think there are things that I can identify with more, and that are good kind of guidance, that are sort of outside the academy. When I went to Poetry Project for the first time, 2011, you could feel it was more like a homeless shelter. When I went in the back room or the parish hall where they have all the food and shit, they sell all the books on New Year's, it felt like a fucking homeless shelter, which I like. I don't mean that in like a flippant way. I mean that like, there was a roughness. There was that still kind of raggedy, anti-academic beat energy there. People like Taylor Mead or Patti Smith was there, or everybody, those kind of old East Village artists. They had, they all wore dark clothes. they had this kind of, Dionysian, very demure, very thoughtful, very mindful. But, one of the things that Yuko Tamo talks about throughout this, and it's a recurring thing with this Ted Jones essay, and it's a recurring thing with beat literature, is just like how anti-materialistic it is. They don't, Ted Jones didn't like eating in fancy restaurants. He liked going to cheap Chinese restaurants or, whatever. And that was sort of a principle that they had. It wasn't about material success or getting rich. Maybe it was about getting famous, I guess. But I don't see those values at all. It's certainly not in New York today. It's so expensive to be here. Everybody likes the finer things. They're used to that. They're used to going to nice restaurants. They're used to, having what they need, traveling in sort of comfort and going to the Hamptons, going to, Europe, going to fucking wherever the fuck. And so, it's hard because, just speaking for myself, you can just feel like I just don't have anything with common with anybody, and I don't share the same values. I wouldn't say that people now are anti-materialistic, especially writers, or maybe not especially writers, but even writers. It seems like writers just want tenure. They want a $1 million book contract. They want to be in Interview magazine. And, the moral, the ethic now is not really, doesn't even discuss this. The people who are woke, the people who play the identity politics game, it's just a way for them to get material success. Oh, I am X, Y, or Z category, so you need to give me the job, you need to give me the grant money, you need to give me the accolade, so I can have this kind of perk, luxury lifestyle or whatever. And, part of, beat means beatitude, right? Beatitude. And it's, once again, it's like this Catholic thing. Kerouac was a big Catholic. And so there was this kind of Christ, allegiance to poverty, to pain, to being a martyr, to being, kind of thinking you're, I don't know. They talk about the Dionysian is, I forget, but it means torn to pieces or something. And one of the things that Dionysus has in common with Jesus is the idea they would have a festival or a holiday every spring, like Easter, where symbolically the metaphor was the world had sort of been torn to pieces by the winter time, the death of winter, and then the rebirth of spring, and kind of a new kind of unification, a new cohesion, a new holistic, and that feeling of being torn to pieces, right? Look at my fucking jacket, or having holes in your clothes. I just don't know. It feels like a psyop, where I don't see any discourse about economics or class other than let's raise the minimum wage, which is all well and good. But, every time I say, or, anytime anybody talks about raising the minimum wage, everybody goes, well, if you raise the minimum wage, inflation will go up because demand will go up. And it's okay, so what the fuck do we do? How do we lift more people out of poverty? To me, something like beat literature probably is more empowering to impoverished people, to people in the underclass. When I was in college and when I wanted to move to New York, I thought I was going to live you know, in a brownstone and write for the New Yorker or something. That's like the ideal of like literary culture and being. It's like, oh, I'm this, you know, guy in like tweed with elbow patches, and like I'm just quiet and cozy in my, and that's just not the world that I fit in with, or, you know, I mean, not that I've had any success at all, but, oh fuck, I'm already on 20%, okay. So I guess I'll wrap up pretty soon. Is this pointless? I don't know. Something to do while I'm walking, I guess. Who knows? Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, please. You know, the open mic. The open mic was the way to sort of like, let's get everybody into poetry. Let's get everyone as valid. You know, it's not this gate-kept MFA application bullshit. It's like everybody has something to say. Bring energy. You know, it's more. There's people in MFA programs who've never done a reading, ever. You know, who get a degree and they've never done a fucking public reading. Not that. I mean, I would say that that's Dionysian, right? Like going to a bar, getting the 2-drink minimum, and being with other people in this sort of group ecstatic feeling that you're making, getting drunk, hearing, supporting each other, being around, being with each other, getting high on each other's poetry, getting high on each other's spirit and soul. This is not the same thing as being in a fucking workshop. You know, this is not the same thing as being in one of these kind of coddled, cordoned off academic programs, which is where, you know, literature is well fed today. You know, that's where people are bourgeois and middle class, right? I don't necessarily think that, like, with beat literature, there was a huge insistence on, like, any kind of, like, class, like, crusade or anything like that. But I think it's implicit, like a lot of things. It's in there. You know, the means of how they did it, how they distributed their literature. You know, creating City Lights books, creating pocket paperback poetry books, you know, like the City Lights Pocket series. It really energized the whole generation of people who were feeling alienated from, you know, modern conformist society. Youth, it was like a youth movement, right? And it became the sort of rock and roll thing in the 60s. All of those rock stars read Allen Ginsberg, you know, whether it's fucking Roger Waters or the Beatles or Bob Dylan, they were all kind of fueled by that beat. But the common wisdom is like, oh, it hasn't held up, you know. Who reads Kerouac anymore? Or Allen Ginsberg is kind of this long in the tooth kind of disorganized, disheveled. And I think part of the message is there's like more important things in literature, or like, you know, literature is probably useful in as much as it, you know, accompanies and accentuates and kind of bolsters your living experience. You know, it's a narrator of living. You know, Kerouac is on the road. He's out in the fucking world. You know, he's with Neil Cassidy in the fucking car. They're cutting all across the continent. They're going to Mexico City, you know. And so what? He sits down and he takes Benzedrine and he writes a novel in 3 days. Well, that's not looked down as legitimate by academic people who spend their whole fucking life in college ruminating in quiet studies, thinking that, you know, it's just such a cliche of what you have to be as a writer. You have to be this kind of like solitary, silent, judgmental, heavy person or something. The Beat thing is more kinetic. It's more action. It's more, and it's not about going back to that. It's about what is now. What is the newest thing now. But and I think part of that is we are losing track of this kind of like animalistic, wild side of things, and there's just no way to make a living outside of surrendering yourself to academia or whatever. And how much fun is that? I also want to talk about wall ball. Okay, so when I was in fucking 7th grade, we used to play this game called wall ball. This is like a massive change of subject. Wall ball was we had a tennis ball, right? And you'd throw the ball at the wall, and if somebody caught it, they could throw the ball at you, and if it hits you, you're out. And this game became like huge. Like when we were kids, it was just like everybody couldn't wait for fucking recess so we could go play wall ball. Or like at recess there'd be 15 or 20 kids, and I was sort of like the czar. I was sort of like the person that started the wall ball and kind of made the rules and shit. And I guess part of my point with the wall ball thing is like it's a piece of my own kind of self-examination, being like, okay, I've always been this kind of organizer person, trying to create, like when I played video games, I like to play multiplayer games. I didn't like single player. I liked like wrestling games because they were kind of open-ended. They weren't linear, they weren't narrative. They were kind of infinite because they encouraged you to use your creativity, create new characters. It wasn't just like, you're this character, you're doing the same fucking mission as everybody else, and that's the game. It was like, and that's still kind of what I do. I'm still kind of like this event organizer, cheerleader guy or something. But there was an element of ego involved. I can't remember exactly what happened. There was this kid, Jeff, who was like one of my good friends, and he always used to sit next to me at lunch. We would always sit at the same table at lunch. We were really into The Simpsons and shit. We were kind of like comedy nerds. He was a writer. He had written like a fucking entire science fiction novel when he was like in 7th grade. That was like 100 pages long. And, but it was also like, he was kind of like sycophantic. That's how I've always, I don't know. Like, I kind of recognized that was not a good type of friendship. To just have somebody that was sort of like a fan or something. Who like laughed at all my jokes and sort of like, just kind of had to put up with me being, the leader of the group or whatever. I'm sure he didn't see it that way. Or, maybe he did and was just like, fuck this guy. But, even at the time I recognized like that was a fucked up kind of relationship. And I didn't want to, make anybody kind of subservient to me in that way. But at the same time, I also realized like it feels good to have people around you that like think you're fucking hilarious, laugh at everything you do, and just think you're like the greatest. I don't know. But one day we were playing wall ball, and I forget what happened, but I kind of threatened him like, hey, if you don't do this, then you don't get to sit next to me at lunch. Ego, like Jerry Lewis, just being an asshole for no fucking reason. I mean, I guess that's the downside of fame, or the pitfalls of, being successful or famous or whatever is just like you start to treat people like shit. You start to get ego, arrogant, whatever. Okay, I've only got 10% battery left. I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. My battery's dying. I gotta buy weed, but I did just want to jump on real fast. I don't know. Maybe some people. It's only, 40 minutes. That's short for me. That's a short video for me, but maybe some people click it because it's shorter. They probably see the 2 hours and are like, fuck this, I'm never gonna watch this. But 40 minutes. So anyway, I don't know. You want both. You want like Apollonian and Dionysian. You want a sort of an order, a form, a control, the archaic torso of Apollo, right? You must change your life. That's a sonnet. And it kind of looks like a torso. It's like the sonnet almost has like a six-pack in a way. The sonnet almost looks like a fucking six-pack. And so, I don't know. The Dionysian, I feel like, is something you have to kind of like harness. It's something that like is wild. It's like a fucking bull. It's like, riding a bull or something. And I just feel like those people don't get any credit. Or, the academics, that like scares them. They're trying to control their little, they don't want to get fired. They don't want to get canceled. They don't want to say anything that offends anybody. They don't want to, I heard Columbia just fired one of their professors for, saying something about how Palestine has a right to exist or something. So it'll be interesting now that school is back in session. I think these protests are going to start up again. The Israel thing, and I would attribute this to just their PR. That issue kind of went away. About a year ago, or, when it happened, October 7th, things were looking pretty dark, and there were a lot of fucking protests. And there was a lot of fucking, it looked like there was World War III was going to happen because of what the fuck was happening in Israel and Ukraine. And to be honest, I don't know, at least since school got out, it feels like that's kind of been swept under the rug. It's still hanging in the background, but it's not like this militarized protest, kind of hairline issue now where it's like fracturing people's relationships. It feels like it's sort of just like gone into the background of the noise or whatever. And I don't know, it'll be interesting to see now that school is because the schools are kind of the drivers. Columbia, that was the big visible protest, right? That the New York media paid attention to and blah, blah, blah. And so, it'll be interesting to see if that resumes or how they conduct this war going forward, and what the reactions to that will be. Hopefully it just kind of, they end the occupation, they end the genocide, But, Columbia University professors are getting fired for even fucking, suggesting that Israel is the bad guy. So, I don't know. In any case, thank you guys for watching. Keep reading. Well, that's the other thing is like, I'm not like anti-literacy, but like my fucking thing on my podcast is like, or this thing, is like, we need to move literature into, or like it could be going extinct, in a certain way. We're so screen oriented and we're so in this kind of like live streaming era that like if literature doesn't figure out a way to kind of like partially occupy or assimilate into that space, rather than just being this kind of affectation parlor activity for the richest people, which is kind of what it is now, and maybe fucking TV shows are literature now, I think, it's like, and I'll end with this, but like, there's always like a new exciting pioneer, like movie stars. For a certain time, I watched this interview with Orson Welles where he's like, you know, it was in the 70s, and he's like, you know, well, a movie star doesn't really exist, or like they, you know, when James Cagney was a movie star, it was like the most exciting thing to be in the culture. It was to be a fucking movie star. And then in the 60s, you know, the most exciting thing to be was a fucking pop star, right? What is it now? You know, now it's probably like being an influencer or something, I guess would be, you know, what is the most exciting thing you can do? What's the newest thing you can do? What's the, you know, and how does kind of literature fit into that, you know? Or is literature just this dusty old, you know, like being a poet or being a novelist was probably the most exciting thing to be in like 1850 or something, but not so much anymore. It's still an exciting thing, but it's almost like an archaic position, I guess, is part of what I'm saying. It's like a lot of these things are kind of like archaic almost, because the newest thing is to be the Dare or whatever, or to be on Twitch, or to be, I don't even know what it is, you know, to be video game designer, I guess, maybe that's the most exciting thing, playing GTA 6 or whatever. What's new? What's the newest thing? What's the, you know, we gotta figure that out. We have to create a craze, you know, we have to create a mania somehow, in like the Beat Generation did. I mean, that is what they did, you know, before rock and roll became like the big thing in the 60s. It's like those books were how people found out how to go to, you know, where the action was. Go to North Beach, go to the coffee houses, go to Greenwich Village. You know, what is it now? Where do we go now? It's all on the internet. To be honest, I feel like the internet is the most exciting place to be. TikTok is the most exciting place to be. And so I think in a certain way, New York is like a retrograde space, you know? New York is such an IRL space that's like, you know, in Ohio, my buddy was doing Twitch 10 fucking years ago. He was talking about crypto and all that shit 10 fucking years ago. And I didn't like it, but like, you know, it's like the cultural conversation is only catching up now, where people are like, oh, Twitch is, get on Twitch. It's like, you know, in a certain way, I think the avant-garde is on the internet. And if you're in Ohio, or if, you know, you might be more ahead of us because you're just on the internet all the fucking time instead of living your life, you know? You're on Twitch. And so, I don't know. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back on next week or as soon as I can. Thank you guys. We love you. Like and subscribe. It's Fashion Week at Easy Paradise. Sign up, and we'll talk to you soon. Good luck.